Hello, everyone. This is Elena with you, and today I wanted to discuss one topic. This topic arose from my other discussion where I was a participant, and it was about Western aid to the Ukraine. My point of view is that West will continue aiding the Ukraine no matter what, no matter what uh, people are saying, no matter what the Ukrainian needs are. West is not interested in the Ukraine as such. West is interested in the damage that Ukraine can do to Russian Federation. That's all. And here I would like to start one video. It is from yesterday, and it is by Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, who was speaking about failure of Western weapons in the Ukraine and the effective work of enterprises of Russian Federation. He's speaking that production of necessary equipment has increased significantly. And on the other hand, Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive not only failed, but it also costed the Ukraine no less than 500,000 of people. And if West really cared about the Ukraine, they would not allow such human losses, because nowadays it is nonsense to lose that much people in an armed conflict. Moreover, back in 2022, in April, there were peace talks started in Istanbul, where Russia was ready for peaceful negotiation of the case, but Boris Johnson prohibited Zelensky to participate in any peace talks, and he said, continue the war. And so, by the will of such people like Boris Johnson, the people of Ukraine are dying, the people of Ukraine are suffering. I'm not speaking only about Russian people who are also suffering, but the major losing party in the conflict is the Ukraine, of course, because that RAM, which West uses against Russia, it suffers most of the damage. Of course, European economies are not doing that bright. And if we look at the measures which are taken by local governments, they are not, I wouldn't call them successful, because Europe is in economical trouble too. And it is not only because we have a rise in fuel prices, and fuel prices are major contributor in rising prices on everything else. Well, maybe we're not so worried about consumption goods, but if we take food, well, food also became pretty expensive nowadays, and in some position we can see that the rise of prices to food products is like 20% or even more. And here I would like to show one video. It is taken from Ukrleaks English channel, and the original video is from Zvezda channel, but it was subbed by Ukrleaks. It is one woman speaking about her son and about her family. And this video was taken in 2022 after liberation of Mariupol, or even during liberation of Mariupol by Russian forces. And here, please see it. The woman is telling her family story. Her son was dead. He was opposing the Maidan power, and he got killed back in 2015. But she and her husband were brutally tortured, brutally beaten. Her husband is dead. And nobody even wanted to come and help both of them, because ambulances were afraid of coming and assisting these people. So she's telling that her husband was beaten to death. And these are the people which West calls civilized, and which is West is saying, yes, we must help these people. Ordinary people of the Ukraine, I don't think that they really benefit anything from Western help. But they're held captives by their own state, by their own government. And why does Western governments needs to continue that? First of all, I have prepared some quotes. This is like what Blinken and Borrell used to say, yes, that Putin will fail and suffer a strategic defeat. And Borrell says if Putin wins war, EU will suffer serious damage. And here it's Ursula von der Leyen, who was saying in Davos that Kyiv must win the war it is fighting against Moscow. For Russia's President Vladimir Putin to lead to his strategic failure. Here, this is a relatively new one. This is from this year, March 19th. This is Defense Minister of Latvia, Andris Prūts, who is saying that there must not be a compromise with Russia on the Ukraine because it is not the right approach, and Russia must suffer strategic defeat in the Ukraine. And here is what Polish President Andrzej Duda said, that yes, we must not negotiate with Russia. Russia must be strategically defeated because it is like question of security of Poland. And here Borrell again, in Kyiv, Europe must support Ukraine no matter cost. And we may ask why. Because like logically, West at least would have to ask for a ceasefire. But of course, we all understand, we're all like grown-up people here, we all understand that Russia will not allow the ceasefire to happen now. And what was possible like back in times of Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 is not possible now. And we can, of course, ask military professionals in this regard, but for civilian who is not who used to carry out analytical work, well, it doesn't seem logical that Russia would agree to a ceasefire now, especially after what you have seen, that Shoigu says that Russian defense production complex works at its best. And well, some of the equipment goes to the front line, and not only to the front line like ahead of schedule. So, and people are very ready to join the armed forces, not only as volunteers to SMO area, but in other forces too. It's like my friend's son, who on purpose failed his school exams to go to serve in the army. And this year, I think he will be applying to military academy. So after year of service, so people are willing to serve, and it's not only about the money itself, because like speaking with Russians, and Russians are very patriotic of their homeland and they're ready to protect it. But what the West wants, the West wants heartland. I didn't put this map here just because. This is Mackinder's heartland theory, and I find it very reasonable and logical. Well, there's also a Rimland theory, which I'm not a fan of, because, well, heartland, it can be self-sustainable, and in order to live normally, you don't really have to have access to the sea. Of course, it is nice and good if you want to trade, but if you have enough resources on your heartland, then you can effectively live there, and you can conquer Rimland if you find it necessary. But if we take a look at the heartland, Russia has both of the territories. Part of it, major part of Russia is heartland, but there are parts of Russia which are also Rimland. So, while having access to the seas, Russia has access, like vast majority of lands, vast majority of resources, and the theory, Mackinder's theory, one of the thesis he proposed is that Europe must not allow one single force to control the heartland, because that the one who controls heartland controls all the rest of the world. On the other hand, knowing that this land is rich of resources, West has always tried to reach out there and rob in the best traditions of Western society. Because when I recently was reviewing the course on worldwide history, I noted one thing. Our history, as it was presented at school, was very West centric. So when we were speaking about Greco-Persian wars, Greeks were also always presented as highly civilized and cultured people. Well, when Persian Empire was like something like dark which came out of nowhere and which wasn't very civilized, comparing to Greeks. But now, when I reviewed the course, which I was like reviewing, the civilization was on Persian side, not on the Greek side. And despite all the beautiful statues that Greeks had and beautiful temples, Persian Empire was much more civilized, and it was how to say, much less warlike than the Greeks, because Persians, yes, they wanted to expand, but they didn't influence the people. They didn't make people live the way they live. So they left a chance for autonomy for the countries which joined the empire. And like if we are speaking from modern like feminism perspective, in Persian society, women had much more rights than they had in so-called civilized Greece. Persia was richer in resources apart from Greece. Greece was very poor in resources. And here, if we go further west, the further to the west you go, the less resources you find. And that is also a problem of Europe. A lot of population on small territory, which is really not very rich of resources. So Europe, like wanting it or not, they had to reach out to other parts of the world. But they didn't want to do it in a normal and civilized manner. They did it with war power. And I'm not speaking about like Roman Empire now, which conquered a lot and which was really, I think it was second global not project, but it was the second wave of globalization. The first one, the first globalization we can recall is Bronze Age globalization wave. The second globalization wave was in the times of Roman Empire, of ancient Roman Empire. And the third wave of globalization we're facing now. But I think this wave is subsiding. But in general, Roman Empire had conquered really a lot. And how to say, they were able to create that state which really ruled over Europe, and which had and which is a foundation of modern European civilization. And Europe has kept the ambitions of Roman empires, despite the fact that real successor of Rome was Byzantium or Constantinople. Western Europe believed that they are the chosen people, and they are free to do what they want to do. And first attempt to reclaim that Roman power, I think I don't know if it was like conscious or unconscious attempt, but it were the Crusades when Pope Urban II he resolved the problem of second sons. I think you know what the problem of second sons means. It's like when feudals, they had a lot of children then, because like children mortality was high, and people were trying to have as much children as possible. And sometimes it happened that not only the firstborn survived, and there were multiple children in family who were alive by the like adulthood. And by local laws, all the property was inherited by the first son, the oldest one. So the rest had to go somewhere and do something. But there wasn't, I think there wasn't lands enough, or like feudal people, like those who were of high, like from higher circles of society, they were not ready to work on lands, and it was something unknown to them. They joined armed groups, and those groups were making war against each other within European territory. And to get rid of those people, uh, Pope Urban II said, well, let's go and liberate the grave of Jesus Christ. And people went. Of course, first of all, it was not the crusade of nobility. It was a crusade of really poor people who had nothing to lose and who would risk anything to live in more human-like conditions. And they were the first who tried to get to like tomb of Jesus Christ. They, not of them, maybe very few of them succeeded, but it gave rise to people from higher society circles to join this movement of crusaders, and there were several crusades, as we all know. But Europe failed there. Of course, they didn't fail in cultural sense, because they became more civilized after contacting more developed civilization, and they brought a lot of things back to Europe. But in general, they suffered defeat, and they had to put their effort elsewhere. And that elsewhere was Russia and territories near Russia, like the Baltic states. So this is like that short intro to the subject. So we can say that Europe, since failure in the crusade, was an enemy of what is to become Russia. And there is, of course, religious difference, because in Russia they have Russian Orthodoxy, and Europe is mostly Catholic or Protestant, and it is also this religion, despite both being like both or three of them being Christian, they have doctrinal differences. And the thing is that Russians were not considered as correct Christians as Catholics were. And that's why they had to be baptized. And that's why Europe, well, I don't think the religion was the reason. I think religion was an excuse to invade, not the main reason, because what we call religious war, in fact, it is war for the resources and war for the human resources too, because the more people under your rule you have, the richer you are, the more wealth you can generate. So yeah, human resources are also resources. Therefore, Europe tried conquering Russia, but they failed. How to say? How jokes say, it was first attempt of EU to to make Russia join it, but they failed. And then there were several attempts by like Polish Lithuanian kingdom, and by Napoleon, who tried to invade, and Swedish. There were wars with Sweden later, before Napoleon, of course. Sweden, wars with Sweden, like Northern War, and then Napoleonic invasion, and then Hitler, and even in the times of like after First World War, when there was a civil war outraging in Russia, a lot of Western so-called allies came to Russia to rob it. So Russia was always a place which West wanted to rob and which West wanted to rule, and they always failed. So now, if we draw the parallel, there's nothing new. Absolutely nothing new. So all the things which are happening now, they have happened before. Only we are witnessing these things in modern era. And that is why the West will not stop its aid to Ukraine. Even if Ukraine fails on the battlefield, and even if uh, intensity of hostilities will subside, but it will subside, and Ukraine will fail on the battlefield. It is like those military supplies which are to be sent to Ukraine according to military people, not according to me. I have listened to experts who are claiming, these are credible experts, they are claiming that no, this will not change anything. And even if the Ukraine will try to destroy Crimean Bridge, they cannot destroy bridge as a whole. And there is a really great article by Andrei Martyanov in this regard. I will provide the link in the description. I think it's about possibility of attacks to destroy the Crimean Bridge. So to sum up, they cannot do it. Yes, they can carry out some damage, but they cannot destroy the bridge itself. And they cannot strategically change anything on the battlefield. Because as you have heard Shoigu before, he said that, yeah, Russian defense production complex works at its best, and some of the equipment goes to the armed forces ahead of schedule. So Ukraine will fail. But what the West is trying to achieve, at least, is to do as much harm to Russia as they can. And the second thought, it is not my thought, but it was very interesting. It was said in that discussion I was a part of, and the person said that he has a feeling that West just tries to get rid of as much of Ukrainians as possible. They don't need trained and equipped army on their borders, and they are afraid of Ukrainians. Because according to Scott and according to some other military experts, Ukrainian armed forces were really first army in Europe after Russia, of course, and second army in NATO. So first were the US. Of course, Ukraine was never, and I think it will never be a part of NATO. But if we take NATO and associates, Ukraine had second best army in NATO in its allies. And it is not my opinion, it is opinion of Mike Mikhailovich. So, and the West, Europe are really afraid of such a force and at their border. And of course, they're trying to get rid of as much of Ukrainians as they can. And at the same time, they're trying to make as much harm to Russia as they can. So it is like killing two rabbits with one shot. I hope they fail, of course. But the thing is that even when hostilities will subside, the West will try undermining Russia further. And if you have read the PASE resolution, I have written a post about it, and I will provide the link too. You will be able to read it if you missed it. That resolution of PASE is clearly Russophobic, and it is like essence of Russophobia and essence of what West really wants from Russia. And if you read it, you will understand why West will never give up helping the Ukraine. In fact, they're not helping the Ukraine. They're helping themselves by using the Ukraine against Russia. That would be more correct. And here, I think I would finish, but I hope you understood my thought. And my thought was that despite Ukraine is losing, and those military aid which it received will not change many things. Maybe it will make life of Russians harder in some certain areas of the front, but in general, it will not change anything. But the West will continue trying to disrupt Russia. And when we're speaking about World War III, well, my opinion is that we are already in this World War III. It is just going on very limited territory. And in fact, it is not war of Russia against Ukraine. It is war of Russia against common West. It's war of Russia against NATO. Of course, it's not called the war because if you call it a war, uh, it is not that large scaled, of course. So, and I think it is kept this way not only for legal reasons, but also for survival reasons of all of the parties of the conflict. But in general, yeah, it is what it is. It is Russia trying to defeat NATO, NATO trying to defeat Russia, because if Russia prevails and West is really afraid that Russia wins, and if you Google the phrase "What if Russia wins?", you can see that there is a major fear among people that, oh, what if Russia wins? Because West now, well, it moved too far from its conservative, not conservative, I'd say, but traditional values it once had. And in the past, we had much more in common. Say, even 30, 40 years ago, USSR and West had much more in common than Russia and common West have now. Because what West now is doing, it's homiciding its own people, not only people around them. I'm not speaking about all of the people who suffered from Western invasions since I don't know, for last 500 years. But now Western homicide is turned inwards too, and all that gender theories, gender politics, where children are allowed to choose their gender and to switch their gender and to take pills without consent of parents. Well, if you don't call it homicide of own people, I don't know how to call it. It's not about freedom and it's not about human rights. It's about depriving people who need psychological help. They're depriving people who need psychological help from having that help and from receiving that help. On the other hand, they just carry out the experiments on children, and they are doing nothing but paying large money to pharmaceutical companies which produce those medicines for children to change their gender. Is it? I don't know. If it is really pro pro people, it looks like homicide to me, and that is why modern West and Russia don't have that much in common as they had even 40 or 30 years ago. Western faith has changed a lot, and of course, losing to Russia would be a disaster to this formation, because it will prove that such a theory, such a lifestyle which they adopt, it doesn't work. And it would be not only like economic failure or something like that, it would be major ideological failure, major worldview failure of the West. And this will put an end to Western civilization as we know it. Of course, Europe will not like die out and so on. No, it will stay where it stayed, but they will have to conduct major changes in their worldview. And they will have to do something with millions of people with who have adopted the values they try to project on all the society. And what all of those people will have to do, well, I don't know. And what those people who are authors of those ideas would do, I also don't know. Because what happens to the author when his idea fails and they see it failing? Well, it's hard. I'm not like playing Like, I'm not, I don't feel sorry for them. I just, I'm just asking what will happen. And this is what interests me a lot. So let's think about it, and thanks for your attention. I doubt that many watch till the end, but if you watch, then I would like to see your comments, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.